Hey guys, sorry I couldn't figure out how to click the button to start it. But I'm Colleen. Thanks for coming in, watching me this afternoon. I'm Colleen from Good Wives Guide to True Crime and Murder by Design. So every 2 days, either Fancy or I jump on here and give you guys a quick update on maybe some of the cases we've already covered or just some new information. And today I'm going to be tying in 2 cases that we've talked about before with some exciting or interesting new updates. Oh, hey, Rebel, good to see you. So we all know Chris Watts. He was a Colorado man, and he is currently in prison because he killed his wife and daughters. So he actually killed his daughters, Bella, who was 4, and Celeste, who was 3, and they were found stuffed in oil tanks after he had murdered them, and then his wife Shannan was found buried nearby, and she had been strangled. And we've kind of talked before about how we think that he didn't really want to kill the girls. He just wanted to kill Shannan. And that potentially maybe one of them saw something and he was afraid that they would say something. So they were kind of, an afterthought about it, because he was cheating on his wife, and which of course he was, because that we see that all the time when men kill their wives. But it was really unfortunate with the girls, and he tried to play it off that he didn't know anything, but we all knew he knew. He was a terrible liar, and he was caught pretty much red-handed. But he actually initially claimed to the detectives that he had killed his wife in a rage after he saw her strangle their 2 daughters. So that Shannan was strangling the kids. But in early November 2018, Watts actually made an unexpected guilty plea, admitting to killing all 3, along with Shannan's unborn son, because she was pregnant. Shortly after the initial claim, Watts told investigators where to find the bodies of his wife and daughters. And it was revealed that that Bella and Celeste were still alive when he drove with them and their mom's body to the oil field. And he chose there because he works there. So then after he killed the kids, he dropped the bodies into the oil tanks, which reportedly had very narrow openings. And then he admitted that he strangled his pregnant wife when she told him that he wouldn't see his children anymore, in response to his confession of having an affair. And so I think it's really heartbreaking and tragic that he decided that he had to kill his kids, but also that they were aware that, their mom was gone. Maybe he told them they were sleeping. But I just can't imagine how frightening that must have been. And it's just really tragic. There's been several really good documentaries about it. The one I recently saw, I can't remember what the name of it was, but I legit cried because it has just a lot of details. But the other part of the case that I found super interesting, this came out a little bit last week. So there was a case here in Wisconsin, Jayme Closs, and she was actually kidnapped by a guy named Watts Patterson. And he had this kid, he was super young, but he forced his way into her home in October 2018. He shot Jayme's dad, James, in the head. Then he forced Jayme's mom, Denise, to put tape over Jayme's mouth while he taped her arms and ankles together. And then once he had Jayme secured, he killed Denise by shooting her in the head as well. Then he dragged Jayme out of the house. And at one point, she almost slipped in her father's pool of blood as Patterson dragged her with one hand while holding the shotgun in the other hand. And then once they got to his car, he put Jayme in the trunk and drove away. And Jayme was 13, so she's just a teenager. And he then took Jayme and to his parents' cabin up in northern Wisconsin. And he had told her that nobody was to know she was there and bad things would happen to her if they did. But he actually, it's not like he was completely alone. There were friends and family who came to the cabin many times for the holidays and just random get-togethers. And he would actually make Jayme get under the bed, and then he would like box her in with boxes and dumbbells just to keep her from coming out. So just essentially being kidnapped. And one day he went off to work, and she became very, very brave. She pushed the weights out, got out from underneath it. And then ran. And it's in the middle of winter, and in northern Wisconsin, it's really freaking cold, snow. But she made a run for it, and she found a woman who was walking her dog. They recognized her from the news and photos, and then took her back to a nearby neighbor's home and called 911. And Jayme got on the phone, said, my name is Jayme Closs. I was kidnapped. My parents are dead. I need help. But she was smart. She knew exactly where his house was. She knew the car he was driving, knew the car license plate, and so intelligent. And so we don't get to often hear from these cases where the victim lives. Typically when there's, an abduction of any age, typically the person is never seen from again. But in terms of Jayme, yep, Natasha Krampusch and Elizabeth Smart and J.C. Dugard and the 3 teens from Cleveland. So they all were able to survive, but they are in the minority of girls who are kidnapped. And it was weird with Patterson. Like, he didn't know her at all. Like, he had driven past a school bus stop and saw Jayme one time and decided that he was going to take her. He decided right then to take her. And he then went and got supplies, and then he shaved all the hair on his body as to not leave any DNA. And then in the middle of the night just went to get her. And so it was just really tragic at the time. So this just happened, a year or so, 2 years ago. I got really upset at social media because there were many, many people who believed that Jayme had a hand in killing her parents, and that maybe she had a boyfriend and ran away with them and, killed her parents for that reason. But Jayme had no boyfriend. Like, they searched her computer, just every option they could. There was no boyfriend. She did not know him. And it was just really upsetting that they were blaming a 13-year-old girl for a crime she didn't commit without having any proof that was happening. And I get it. We do see that sometimes where, the child does do that, but it was a really far stretch to do that with there was being no evidence. And, 13. And Jayme was a very sweet, innocent girl. She loved her parents. She had good friends. So it was just really upsetting for me seeing people start blaming her without any evidence. But so the reason I bring these 2 cases up is because according to a new book titled The Perfect Father, so Chris Watts, obviously he's in prison for killing his wife and 2 daughters, that he met the Wisconsin killer Jayme Patterson at the Dodge Correctional Institute in Waupun, Wisconsin. And I just could not believe that these two came across each other's paths. So apparently they became such good friends that Watts helped Patterson calm his hot temper while reading Bible passages to him at night. And the pair reportedly discussed and dissected the passages afterwards. During other downtimes, Watts reportedly sends letters to his parents so they can read them aloud to his daughter's burial sites, which I think, honestly, that's a little disturbing. Like, you killed them. Like, it's no. But his mom did say that we go to the gravesite and read them out. They're beautiful letters that brought tears to my eyes. I never knew my son because he never expressed emotions. It was hard for him to verbalize, but he can write it down on paper. I think that's super disturbing that he writes these letters and has somebody read them out to his daughter's gravesites. Like, you did it. Like, why? And to me, it's like really disturbing. If I was, the parent, he could send them, but it would just kind of like go into a box to never be seen, by anybody. But I mean, to each their own, but I still think that's weird. But I don't know. I think it's crazy that they're friends. I don't think serial killers should have friends, or even just killers in general. You're in prison for a reason. But, Watts is older and James is younger. He's in his 20s. And so him having like a mentor to help guide him, I am so uncomfortable with that. Like, he kidnapped a 13-year-old girl, killed her parents. For a spur of the moment thing, Watts kills his wife and daughters. I don't really know if he planned it or not, or at least he didn't plan the girls, but if he planned Shannan's murder. But they should not be friends. They should not be allowed to communicate and help console each other in prison. And just should talk. I just think it's so crazy that these two well-known killers know each other, communicate with each other, and that he consoles Patterson by reading him Bible verses. Like, no, I don't think he's a religious man at all. And killed your kids. Okay, so Mama Bear, it has been reported that they are friends and they help each other in prison. And so even if they're not best friends, they know each other and they communicate with each other. So, I mean, it's not great, but, and I don't agree with it, but I think it's likely that's happening, especially if you're in the same prison. The prison up here in Wisconsin, it's obviously not as huge as other prisons are across the country. But it's super, super crazy. And I don't know what you guys think about people in prison being friends with each other. And does it determine the type of crimes? Like, what if, these are two like sex offenders who then can communicate about, the crimes they've committed and brag to each other about that. Like, to me, it's on like that same level that you are having like an emotional outlet person to communicate your feelings to on the inside. And, they're criminals, and I don't think that they're not going to talk about, the crimes they've committed. And so to me, that really grosses me out. Like, there was a sex offender in Florida. He had kidnapped and killed Periwinkle, I think Jones. And when he was arrested, there's like a video and audio tape of him where he was talking to other prisoners about, the offenses that they've committed and bragging about that he had killed and assaulted, this young girl. And so I don't know. That's what I think is happens way too often, that they find support inside and then can just talk and brag about what's happening. But to me, like, I am so uncomfortable with these two killers communicating with each other and helping each other. They're horrible people. I mean, one, Chris Watts kills his wife and unborn baby and children. Patterson killed Jayme's parents and kidnapped her and did who knows what. So I'm uncomfortable with it. And yeah, it happened, last year. It's not like current, but still not okay. There are way too many situations where people communicate with people in the prison who have no business to communicate with them. And we see this a lot in the Gypsy Rose case, where a bunch of girls message Nick Godejohn and sent him emails and letters saying how much they love him. And he is completely psycho. And he communicates back, and he communicates in such a violent way and just very masochistic and just disturbing emails back. And so it's kind of the same preface, like giving them that opportunity to communicate lets them live in their own feelings and re-experience the crimes they've committed. And it really is disturbing to me. And I don't think, like, I get it. People need to have, social communications. We can't isolate everybody from the rest of the world. But like, I don't think they should be allowed to communicate their like dark feelings out to other people. I don't know what you guys think about that, but reflect on it. Let us know if you agree with me, or if you think maybe they should have more leeway or more strict rules regarding communications. Get a little poll going and see what you think should happen. Should serial killers or just killers in general be allowed to communicate and be friends with other, prisoners who killed people? Same with people who sexually assaulted people. Should they be allowed to communicate with other people? Should outside members of the public be able just to email people and the prisoners be able to respond back in whatever way they see fit, even if they're reliving, the crimes they've committed, or expressing that they would commit more crimes? I think it, like with Nick Godejohn, he did an interview way earlier this year, and he said that if he had to do it over again, he would just do it differently. So it's, these people don't have remorse at all, and they just want a way to do it but not get caught. When they write to each other, are their letters read by the warden before they get them? So between Patterson and Watts, because they were in the same prison, I think they were just talking. Like he would read Patterson like Bible passages at night, and then talk about them. But in terms of the letters, Nick's emails, I think sometimes they get screened, but a lot of times they don't. And I think there's been, situations where they get screened after the fact, and then they lose privileges for, a couple weeks. But it's still I am not comfortable with that. Nick literally sends emails saying that he would hit somebody, beat somebody, assault people, sexually assault people, call women every single horrible name in the book. And he just kind of deals with it. I mean, he's going to be in prison forever. And So he just gets to have the opportunity to revel in his feelings all the time, even if it's, he gets flagged and can't send a letter or email for a month or 2 months. When he does get those privileges back, he has done the same thing over and over again. It's like one of those behaviors, they don't change. And it's unfortunate. I know last week and then on our YouTube and podcast, we've been discussing how with like sexual predators and pedophiles that there's no changing a pedophile. They do not belong anywhere near, the LGBTQ spectrum. It is not, I'm attracted to children. No, you're sick. That there is no consenting relationship between a child and an adult. And that I've only seen like small instances where people will admit that they have a problem before they commit a crime, but then they take some proactive steps to become insanely isolated. So that way they don't feel that temptation, because they admit that if they were given that opportunity, they would do, the offenses. But almost all the time, they don't change. They're always going to have those feelings. And the more victims, and we talk a lot all the time about how if, when you kill somebody, like obviously horrific and tragic, but you die, and your family suffers, but it's something, it's final. But when you have been sexually assaulted, especially as children, and you pretty much die inside and die over and over and over again, and you have to live with this tragedy forever. And it causes, mental and physical harm to people in the community, families. It's super hard. And unfortunately, we see that children who were abused will go on and become an abuser when they're an adult. And so it's just this vicious cycle. And it's really sad. Yeah, so Lilacs and Roses, like I'm not saying entirely solitary confinement for every single prisoner, because that does exacerbate issues, but there's like a limit. I don't think that, they should be able to talk about certain subjects, and, if it is flagged that they are, then they, do get punished and go into solitary confinement and lose communication privileges. Because you don't know what somebody is saying to each other. And I don't know. There's a limit to what I think is acceptable and what's not acceptable, and have, communicating about, the crimes you've committed. Not okay with that. Definitely not okay with that. And so I do understand them needing internet access, but it does depend on what they're looking for. Typically, it's not, given like, here's the laptop and, go do you. It's emails or phone calls, and the lawyers have that responsibility. Some, prisoners are allowed to, check out books in regards to, the legal defense, strategies. But I don't think they're just given a computer and just say, okay, you have a half hour. That would be awful. Because you could look up anything you want that way. Yeah, so like we said, what the email system wasn't supposed to be for fans. It was just supposed to be for an easier way for families to communicate, in a more rapid response, because when you send the letters, it has to go through like a screening process, but it's being misused for other purposes. But just think about it. Think about what you guys think about how should prisoners be allowed to communicate with other prisoners in that kind of way. Do you think they should? Should they not? Should they be able to communicate with people that are not, related to or working on their case, such as fans of the crimes that they committed? So, Jesse, they are in two different prisons now, but they were in the same prison. They did end up moving them because, once pretty much somebody knows you're there, then you're a target. All right, guys. So I know I went over my 15 minutes, but I just think this story is really interesting. Obviously, it ties into the family annihilator subject that we talk about, and then into Wisconsin cases and kidnapping cases. But so yeah, let us know your opinions and what you think about this, their cases, and what prisoners should be allowed to do once they're inside and what they shouldn't be allowed to do. So we'll see you guys soon.